Welcome back. Today we have an extra special treat for everybody. My guest today comes from one of the most storied families in American history. His grandfather being Franklin Delano Roosevelt, his grandmother being Eleanor Roosevelt, his great-great-uncle being Teddy Roosevelt, and all the other Roosevelts in between. He is of the renewable energy field. That's where he got started. However, he has now transitioned into cannabis. He has a beautiful company called Lucida Club, which helps brands identify their customer base by providing a better retail experience, a better shopping experience. We're definitely going to talk about it today. I can't wait to talk about some of these stories. My guest, Jack Roosevelt.
I'm really interested about the brand and about everything that OG is trying to do. It seems really, really interesting. And I want to learn more about kind of the founding of OG as well, because I've been lightly following the development of the marketplace up here in Maine, and it seems it's had a weird trajectory that's very different to anywhere else, primarily because of the kind of the carer market. I'm not using the right term, but the caregiver marketplace, which really developed. So it seemed to me when everybody was trying to open up retailers, I'm like, but you already have, you don't need to have or didn't used to, it seemed to me, didn't need to have a medical dispensary, because all the caregivers essentially were dispensaries in their own right.
That's how Will started. So Will started as a delivery service. But as
the caregiver, you were able to grow and process and do the whole 9 yards. You were able to be vertically integrated, but on a micro level.
Yep, exactly.
Which was fascinating to me to watch how that was growing up.
Yeah.
And then
I started this brand, the Dr. BeeWell brand, as a caregiver.
Oh, you were the caregiver as well. Okay,
That's
cool.
how I started it, 100%. And then I was like, okay, this is. I don't want to be the caregiver. I don't want to produce. I want to just show that I have proof of concept and then license it. And that's what I've done with Berkshire Roots. That's what I'm doing up here.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
And so how did you get tied in with OG?
Just because I've been doing this show and, with the podcast and the listenership that I've been able to gain, people have taken notice of what I've done. And I was in a place before, like I was telling you, in New Hampshire. Yeah, I started the caregiver business here in Maine, and because it was the least barrier to entry. You could do it with a $200 LLC filing, getting a little bit of insurance and going from there. And I was like, okay, let's see what we could do here. Okay. Let's get this going. I didn't necessarily want to be I created a really novel process on how to produce and how to do it, but I didn't necessarily want to. I don't. So
you were doing honey already, right? Before you started doing the infused side
before I started infusing with cannabis, exactly. Yeah. So I was doing honey. I had a company called BeeWell Box.
Yeah.
Which was the first honey-based subscription service.
I love that.
Yeah, dude, it was cool. So it was successful in that we would go to local beekeepers. I'm a pharmacist by trade. I was kind of disillusioned with that, looking for a way out, looking for a way to be.
And I got a whole nother startup that we need to talk about from the fact that you're a pharmacist by trade, because, we'll get into that later.
Okay.
But I got a whole nother startup to do with you on that one.
Yeah, giddy up. I love that. Yeah. I love that. What's happening around pharmacy, it's happening so quickly that I thought when I made the switch, I thought, okay, I'm not going to necessarily want to go back into pharmacy, and I'm not going to. I'm done with that. But now there's so much that's changing so quickly with AI and the way that we're going to be able to test for biomarkers, and is that pharmacy is becoming becoming exciting to me again.
The drug development side of it's insane, but even from the standpoint for me is how do you actually do the prescribing and matching people with the right drugs is going to be super interesting going forward.
No, exactly. It's all going to be so specific in that, they call it pharmacogenomics, where your genes will be specifically tested to know what drugs work. Like even now, like a drug like lisinopril, which is first-line therapy for somebody with hypertension, with high blood pressure.
Yep.
It only works in 40 to 47% of the population. That's used in. That's a small, that's half, that's less than half. So it's that's first line treatment. Somebody comes in, hey, here's the drug for hypertension. Yeah. Probably not going to, maybe not half the time it's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
So that, I hope that there's a lot of lobby and a lot of stuff that's cemented in place that will prevent a lot of this stuff from happening, which I hope it just is so good and so that they can't avoid it, that they can't, there's so many outcomes that we're finding and health-based outcomes that we have no understanding of it at all.
And I'm hoping that also kind of puts what I want to do out of business, in the sense that one of the key problems right now is the shortage in the marketplace for a lot of medications, because we've got supply issues coming out of different places like China, but also here in the States where, we'll have we only have 2 or 3 locations across the U.S. that are producing a lot of the drugs, and it depends on the drug. And then all of a sudden you get one of them shut down. And so my middle son is 4. He's got really bad asthma, and that is tied to his food allergies. But when he gets sick, he needs very specific drugs. And throughout 6-8 months of the year, anytime he gets any kind of congestion, odds are he's going to end up on a steroid or on a multiple times a day inhaler or vaporizer or something to keep his lungs free so that he can breathe properly. And finding those drugs, a lot of the time, they're on the list of some of the ones with shortages.
Wow.
And so for me, I'm your ADD and dyslexic poster child. And so I take methylphenidate every day, the long-lasting one. And if I don't, I am like out to lunch with the fairies. You will find me an hour and a half after you talk to me, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh yeah, well, I just went down this rabbit hole. Yeah. Got nothing done, but I'm down the rabbit hole. And so,
this guy too, dude.
And so if I don't get that, but what I have to do every single 30 days, every month, I have to call every single pharmacy within a 2 to 3 hour drive to figure out who has what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even taking the one that I would like to be taking, because the one that I want to be taking, you just can't get ever.
Brand name or something?
Even the generic, they don't have it. It is not.
Generic, yeah.
It is not out there. It's the most popular one, and so anytime it gets in, it's gone. And so I'm on the one that I've been on for a long time, and I'm on a relatively low dose, but I still have to call all of the pharmacies within like an hour to even 3 hours sometime drive to find who's got it in stock. And then I call my doctor and he sends the prescription in. And I sit there and I'm like, and you can't just call Walgreens and say, so tell me who's got it in stock, because they can't tell you.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with it. They can't tell you. Your doctor, because it's a controlled prescription,
doctor
needs
can't
to send it to the specific pharmacy.
Exactly. So if they send it to the pharmacy and you go, hey, it's in, they're going to call you and be like, yeah, we don't have it in. And then now you got to call around. And so like Walmart,
you can't just call. That pharmacy can't just take that prescription because
and
it's
just
C2 and send it to another. Like every other prescription, they would be able to send it to another pharmacy and they would be able to fill it there and be able to find it. But no, you need to actually call the doctor again. The doctor needs to
has to cancel the first prescription and send it again. And so I don't even call Walmart pharmacies anymore because they won't tell you whether they have something in stock unless they have the prescription in their hand. And I'm like, but if you don't have it, why am I sending the prescription to you to then have you tell me you don't have it, to now have to cancel the prescription and get my doctor to resend it somewhere else? Like that's insanity.
Horrible
to me.
Business.
It's and so from the standpoint of the consumer, and I look at what we do at Lucida, and I'm like, this should be really, really easy. We should be able to just tell people on a simple, like, you come to our website and you put in the name of the prescription, you put in your zip code, and I'll tell you the nearest pharmacies that just have it in stock. I don't need to give you quantities. I just need to give you a binary yes, no. And so here are the ones that have it in. Now you know who to call.
Yeah, the safety is the problem. Is that that's what they would say, that safety is the problem because somebody's going to come rob the pharmacy. They know that it's here. Whatever.
It's that's ludicrous in my mind, because what you're doing is you're more likely to win the lottery than probably have that be an issue.
Yeah, and there's also on the back end, there's already these systems that exist that you could tap into that even if the patient didn't have access, the doctor could have access. So they could come up and they could get this and say, oh, it's in this area. I know that this is the closest to the patient's house. Yep. We're going to call it into this pharmacy 100%. And let the patient know.
And you could make it so that only doctors can sign into it. Yeah. You can trim this down. And even when I've called the independent pharmacies, they don't want to do this because they don't actually want more customers than they already have. primarily because they don't want to have to deal with customers who have bad insurance.
Yeah.
So their problems are getting paid from the insurance companies. So if they have more people coming to them and they're not able to filter who's walking in the door with what insurance, they just don't want like random people walking in and having to then deal with somebody's random insurance that they don't want to actually deal with.
It's almost like there's three different models, I feel like, in independent pharmacy right now. There's either you're compounding and you're making testosterone and Ozempic, and other compounds that to help people pay for those medicines that are too expensive to get right from the manufacturer, or you are super specific in the insurance game. You're either super specific and you just specialize in Medicaid, the cheap insurance that people, that you just do that. You don't really, I mean, if someone comes in with better insurance, sure, you'll service them, but you want the Medicare patients. And then you have other people who they're not even, they have their really good insurance, or they're coming in and saying like, we don't even need to use insurance. Like let's waive the insurance. Like I can pay cash.
And so
those are the two, other than that, if you're not a CVS or Walgreens, you can't exist.
Yeah. And I was looking at them and I was like, oh, this is going to be perfect for the independent pharmacists. And they don't want it. They don't want it to exist because they don't want more people coming through the door than they're already servicing.
Yeah.
Which blew my mind. So now you're stuck with, okay, how do we make this work for the CVSs and the Walmarts and the Rite Aids and everybody else, which Rite Aid doesn't exist anymore. But now you're stuck dealing with the big pharmacies, and you're like, and it's like, okay, but are you really actually helping the consumer better?
Do you think it would just be for prescriptions like Adderall?
I would just have it as, so the FDA and there are a couple and one of the pharmacy associations actually put out a list of all of the prescription drugs that are in quote unquote shortage. Mm-hmm. And I would just say it's for all of the ones that are in that sort of top 10% that are really in short supply and have a higher demand. That's where I'd start. And then ultimately you want it to be for everything that's on that list. The question is, can you it's building the database to be able to do that. So in my mind, the first version would be to start at the ones that are in the top end, that are the most in demand and in short supply. The next model would be to find those ones that are in short supply but fit like a niche where the demand is really acute, because you're dealing with a problem that is not as common, mm-hmm. and therefore, how do you get the supply? Like really try and aim it at patient service and really giving better quality of care for patients that are really in need, not just the people like me who are looking for their Adderall or their whatever, right? Mm-hmm. You want somebody who's got a unique illness that they need a very specific drug that is hard to get a hold of, and now you're trying to give them the ability to not have to, make a call for like literally sit on the phone for 3 days just to try and find it.
Right, you're definitely onto something here, because like with the specialty pharmacies and stuff, they're trying to figure this out right now somehow, because there are some drugs in some disease states that like patient needs medicine, needs
and
it
they
now.
can't have a break in the
right.
supply.
Can't have a break in the supply, right?
Yeah, and so you've got to know
like
where it's coming from.
Full-time job for people, like you're saying, having to call around. And
parents have that. We have to do it for our son, and he doesn't need stuff that's like really out of the box. It's just
some albuterol and some steroids.
Yeah, albuterol, but when it's in short supply, it's tough to get, and so maybe you're like, and so we tend to keep a supply in the house, knowing that we'll get a new prescription before we run out. Anyway, we're going down a rabbit hole, and so our ADD is going nuts right now.
And that's what the show is all about. Going down rabbit holes.
I love
kind of just exploring.
It's not hard to get me to go down a rabbit hole. I can sit here and talk about anything for a long time.
Oh, I love it. I love it. What so you grew up in you didn't grow up in the United States, right?
Nope.
You grew up in England?
Yeah, I moved to England when I was 9, just before my 10th birthday.
Just before your 10th birthday?
Yeah. So It was the summer of 1987.
Okay. And what was that? Do you remember do you remember living in the United States before? Because I have some memories from before when I was like 9 and stuff, and probably like maybe from like 5 or 6 on. But before then, I don't have a ton of memories. I don't.
Yeah, no, I've got a bunch of memories, and actually, ironically, I have some of them I thought I was older, but given where my memories are from, they had to be from when I was like 3 or 4, just given the fact that where they were centered and where we were living at the time. And so, yeah, I have a lot of memories. I mean, I essentially lived with my dad till I moved to England.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my parents got divorced when I was 3, I think, and so yeah, I lived. And my father was a lot older. He was 64 when I was born.
Yeah.
And so my mom didn't really contest custody. They basically split me 50-50. So I didn't really know the difference.
It was amicable.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, okay.
Totally,
Giddy up.
totally.
Okay. That's awesome.
And so in the beginning it was very easy. I was primarily with my dad, although it was pretty much 50-50 throughout the year. And then my mom got remarried and moved to England. And when I was 9, I ended up having a really bad accident with my father, and he ended up in a coma, traumatic brain injury. And so I ended up moving over to England to live with my mom and my stepfather, my little sister, for initially just for a year while he was going through rehab. But then he got lung cancer and passed away pretty quickly. And so I ended up staying over there right the way through till coming back here for college. Yeah. It was it was awesome growing up over there.
Yeah.
So, out of tragedy comes some great stuff. So
yeah, man,
it definitely gives you a different perspective on things.
That is some tragedy, and I didn't realize that there was that you had been in an accident.
Yeah, we were in a horse and cart accident. Actually, my dad. We had originally when I was younger, my dad had a thoroughbred stud farm. Had a full arable. We had cattle, arable. We had the stud farm as well. And then as he got older and sold that, we just had a couple horses, just a small little, probably like 3 or 4. And so we took a pair in hand out for a drive at the beginning of the summer, and they bolted going down the driveway. And the cart flipped over. He had the reins wrapped around his hand, so he was pulled out. I was thrown out of the cart. I was 9 at the time. My stepmother was there, and my dad was there, and so yeah, he was pulled out and dragged for a little while behind the horses.
Yeah, and didn't necessarily like fully recover from that.
No. He never kind of got back to 100%. He took a pretty big blow to the head. Lost his left eye, partially paralyzed on his left side, but it was really the blow to the head that really kind of set him back.
TBI, man, it's a real thing.
It is. It's huge, and it can have a lasting impact on everybody around. And so, but he was looking like he was making a pretty good recovery. Was never going to make it back to 100%, but somewhere in the 90+%. But yeah, he ended up getting lung cancer within the next year, and died just over a year after the accident. Actually died on his birthday. So he turned 74 the day he died.
Oh, that's young. That's young. My story is a TBI. I was going into my 4th year of pharmacy school, which is generally regarded as like the hardest year of your pharmacy career, at least at my institution. And I was going to be the president of my fraternity. I was just all this stuff was, I was a leader in like all these different groups and organizations. Really, doing internships. I was all over the place. And I was going to see my first nephew. I was doing an internship down on Cape Cod. It was really cool. I lived down there and got.
So where were you on the Cape?
At that point, I was in South Yarmouth.
Okay.
So I grew up on going down to the Cape, going down to Chatham. I was we had a little house down there, and got to so I wanted to somehow be back down there. And my brother had done this cool internship with CVS, where it was kind of like the real world, where they would put all these interns together, and we'd live in a house, like 5 or 6 of us, or 7 or 8 of us, for a summer because they needed extra help down there. Because they're the population booms, and it is a lot of older people, so you need more pharmacy techs, more pharmacy interns. So they pay for your housing. They give you a stipend. Pretty cool to live down there. I was just experiencing. My brother had done it, so I knew retail. I knew retail wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to get as far away from it as possible. But it was something cool that I could do for now. And I was like, okay. So I drove up to my brother. My oldest brother had a kid, the first one of our, child to come out of my, my siblings. I was all excited about it. I drive up. I'm going to see my friends in Boston. I party with my friends in Boston on Friday night. And then Saturday, the baby is born. You know, me and one of my friends would go see the baby. It's amazing, this whole thing. And I have to work on Sunday.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, I'm going to still be good here and just take this slow and, you know, hang out with my friends on Saturday night, and I'll just drive to the Cape in the morning. I'll wake up at 7:30, get to work by 9, whatever. Take Route 3. Next thing I remember, I didn't party that hard the night before. I think I did stay up a little bit late, you know. You know, I think that me and a lady friend, you know, were flirting and always just kept keeping each other up late or whatever. But I 9 in the morning, I remember on Sunday. Next thing I remember, it's 4:30 in the morning on Monday, and I'm in the ICU at Mass General Hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I have 39 stitches here, 42 here. My ear got ripped all the way off. I have 12 staples in the back of my head here.
Okay.
Yeah, I dislocated jaw and a brain bleed. So they had the true TBI, and they were trying to, you know, I was out of it for, this was like, you know, not very close to my birthday as well. I'm June 30th, and this was July 5th.
Yep.
So, or July 6th. And so I had to figure out how to, like, when I went back to school, you know, 2 months later, I didn't know how to learn. I didn't know how to, everything was different.
So you were back in school within 2 months.
Yeah, and you want to know what? It probably wasn't like, I look at pictures of myself now, and like I've always been a guy that just pushed through, you know, through, be the man, right? Be the guy. And so like maybe I should have taken a little bit more time off to heal and do that, but I just was like, go, go, go. Let's make this happen. You know, here, you got some pills, you know, some.
Yeah, but maybe you also wouldn't have recovered at the same rate, because I mean, it's pretty difficult to tell that you had a problem like that now talking with you, whereas at the time that was probably obvious, but at the same time your brain heals when you use it.
Yeah, it's very true.
So it may have been that you pushed straight through that allowed your brain to kind of start making those connections again.
I love that perspective.
And heal.
Yes, I love that perspective. Like, and I do think that you're right about that in a way, because I have never really stopped, and my brain just keeps like, even now it keeps getting better. Like I keep.
But like, were you doing the rehab and the behavioral health stuff, which allowed you to start to figure out how to learn again, how to study, how to actually kind of make, how to help your brain make those connections? Or were you just like, I'm throwing myself in the deep end and I'm just going to get back on with my life?
For everything they told me to do, I did.
Yeah.
You know, like I was a good patient. I was in school. I knew, like, at that point, I thought like medicine was the greatest thing ever. Yep. You know, allopathic medicine was the greatest thing ever. And I was like, I'm going to listen to whatever these people say. And I did listen to what they say. And they didn't, you know, I feel like they saw me as someone who like got through a traumatic injury, and then they were like, oh, you're alive, you're good. Like, you know, keep going and you know, show up here every once in a while. We're going to make sure you're good. And, you know, if you need more, you know, if you need more opiates, we'll give you more opiates. But, you know,
exactly. Not necessarily let's get you back to 100%. It was more like, okay, you're alive, so just be happy.
Just be happy and not even
kind of
like.
accept your lot.
Accept your lot, 100%. And so, like, you know, there was one person, you know, like this behavioral therapist who did help me and have me try to understand what was, you know, like you're going to have to learn differently now. Like things are going to be changing for you likely. And, you know, it doesn't mean that it won't always be there.
Now, were the physical issues just the ear, the stitches, or did you have trouble walking, or was there coordination issues, or was it primarily on the cognitive side?
It was a little bit of trouble from like from walking for like a month was challenging. You know, it would like feel like I was slow. You know, I just would kind of just be slow. Like I could do it. I wasn't like other people I've seen that can't. You know, they physically can't do it anymore. But I was just like slow. Everything was slow. Not just walking. Like everything was slow. Like getting up. You know, moving my arm. Like all of it was slow. But I wanted to be the president of the fraternity. I wanted to, you know, be back in school. I wanted to, you know, be the guy who I was going to be. And I wasn't, you know, I was like, I can't let this stop me. You know, I kind of, you know, with hindsight, it would have probably been better if I did take it a little bit slower in terms of like still maybe going through like what you're saying, but just to also give myself the time, like, dude, you know, don't start partying right away. You know, don't do all this stuff right away. You know, maybe, you know, there's some other breaks that you should take in your life, and I definitely didn't do those. You know, it's like, let's just full send. We survived, and we're gonna go. We're gonna giddy up.
Yeah. So, and now, was it a car accident? Or?
Yeah, it was a car accident. So it was a solo car accident. I was driving from Boston to Cape Cod, and you know, for the morning shift, and no one was there. I must have fallen asleep at the wheel or had a seizure. We don't really know. My mom has epilepsy. So
so that could have been, had you had a history of epilepsy?
I've had one other seizure since, you know, in between those time period. Nothing beforehand, but one seizure afterwards. but it was that was right after my sister had passed away.
So
and
it
I
was more
wasn't
like
like
stress?
sleeping, and I
Yeah.
wasn't sleeping. It was pretty stressed. So,
And also the TBI could have been more kind of set the scene for
Yeah.
the seizure later rather than it being a seizure at the time of the accident.
exactly.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
might have just fallen asleep.
Okay.
That's what I think it could have been. And
Yeah, yeah.
but they just don't know. So they say it could have been that too.
Yep.
So 2 full rotations and then hit a tree. Yeah, so they had to do like the jaws of life and the whole 9 yards, and really shaped me into like who I am today.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like my life would be so different if this didn't happen, and I'm grateful for it, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
wild because I would just be a pharmacist who's just whatever. I'd be fine. My family would be okay, but I wouldn't. I would be faking it. I'd still be faking it, and this like gave me an excuse and a realization to be like, oh, I do want to be different. I am different, and it's okay to be different, and let's find health in a different way.
That's very cool. I mean, that's a great story. It's not cool that you got injured, but it's actually a great story. And again, out of tragedy comes some really amazing opportunities and, allowed for your life to take a slightly different path than you were potentially on in the beginning.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Did you after you moved, did you still have interaction with your dad's side of the family?
Oh yeah. I would come back every summer for a month to 6 weeks every summer and spend it over here. I'd come back every other Christmas. The benefit is in England we have a slightly longer Christmas vacation.
Okay.
So it's usually around a month. We have a much shorter summer vacation. If you're lucky, you're getting like 8 weeks. But I have some friends that live up in Scotland where their kids are only getting like maybe 6, but they also have longer, Christmas and then a longer sort of spring vacation for about a month.
So 6 weeks for summer?
So we would get about 8 weeks for summer. So I would come back here for about a month every summer. And then I'd be back here every other Christmas for at least 2 to 3 weeks. And so that allowed me to come back. But again, it was different because I was 9 when I went over there, but my dad being a lot older when I was born, my brothers are a lot older than I am now and were then. So I was born an uncle to 6. I was kind of more like I was more the age of being a younger sibling to my nephews and nieces. So my 2 brothers were born in 1938 and 1941. So they're both in their 80s now.
38 and 41, and you were
Yeah.
77?
And I was 77.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, I've got 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters from my dad's side. And so, I would come back every year, at least for a month, if not 2, and spend it over here with my family. And so I never really lost contact with my immediate family, but the larger side of my dad's family, because we're a pretty big family, I would say I wasn't in a ton of contact with a lot of my cousins and slightly more distant relatives. Which my brothers and my sisters have all had like more contact with them.
Right. Okay. And was that more so because of the age gap, or because you were gone?
No, it was more because I was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just simple facts like our vacation schedule in England for school doesn't really overlap over here. So we'd be doing a family reunion here that would mesh with U.S. Standard vacations, and I don't think I was ever able to go to any of the family reunions, and we would usually do like one every year or 2.
Oh man.
Until I was probably in my 20s.
Okay.
And living over here for college. Just because the timings never meshed. I was always either about to go to school, I was in school, something like that. So I was never able to like get out and go and do any of those. So my immediate family, my brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, I had good contact with them, but like the slightly more distant family wasn't. I never really kind of got into contact with a lot of them. There's still a lot of my cousins I've never met.
I bet. I mean, it's a big family, dude. It's
huge.
It's so
it's
massive, huge. And so many people who have made like a lot of impact in the world, right?
Yeah.
So like that, there might be people, there's probably so many people, in your family that, like I said, that you've never met that have made huge impact, that people are like, oh, do you know this person? Do you know this person? And they're like, well, no, that's just specific to you. That's like my eighth cousin, so I haven't seen them.
And we've got two different sides of the family too. So if I talk to people that are from New York and they're like, oh, you're a Roosevelt, do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, actually, we've never met, but we have a ton of friends in common.
Yeah, right.
And I know his name or her name from, but yeah, so it's that because they're on the other side of the family.
Right, the Oyster Park
Oyster Bay Roosevelts versus the Hyde Park
Roosevelts. Yeah. And so that's another fascinating thing too, that like the Oyster Bay Roosevelts were Republicans, right? And then the Hyde Park Roosevelts were Democrats.
Yep.
And what a cool, like that to me is like the coolest thing, because like imagine that now, some big storied family, in the U.S. that could be on both sides and have, be friends with each other and break bread together occasionally, or at least have friends together and not hate each other and not have this. That's what it is right now in the world, right?
Yeah. Now it's so polarizing, but I don't know. I'd be interested to see which side of the fence, going back in history, different members of my family in the past, which side of the fence they'd come down on today, just because we've become so polarized. And I look at both sides, the Democrats and Republicans, and I see the intention by most of our leaders today is not to unite and not to actually lead, but primarily to create divisive resentment between everybody, and that's how you garner votes, is by scaring everybody. I don't see very much actual leadership out there. It's really scary.
Do you think that, because I agree with you, and like I was, growing up, I was like a history buff, I love this stuff, and like you look at men, like your grandfather and like Teddy Roosevelt, and they were just different. They wanted to be leaders, right? They were people, JFK, I feel like these guys were leaders. They wanted to bring people together. They might have had different ideas of policy and how to do that, but they weren't just saying it to say it and to separate people. They actually thought that this was a good idea and that this was going to bring people together and make the United States a better place. What do you think? Like, do you think, like your grandfather, where do you think to that question, where would he land today? He was a Democratic president, 4-term Democratic president. Where do you think he would land today?
He was a Democrat. I think he'd come down on the side of the Democrats, but again, the one thing about my grandfather was he was a pragmatist and a politician, and I think it really I would like to think that he would be a Democrat today still. And I look at somebody like TR, who was my, great uncle, and he was an interesting character. I mean, and character being the operative word, amazing leader, this just force of nature. I don't know if this story is true about him, but I like to think it is, because it just sort of goes to add to his personality. But and it also speaks to the time from a security standpoint. But he used to like to, from a shock value, he liked to push himself. So he'd go for a swim when he was at the White House. He'd swim across and he'd come out the other side. And this is back when people would take their carriages and they'd go for a ride and they'd be there with their horses and whatever. And it was usually be in the late afternoon and all the ladies would be out. And so he'd emerge coming out of the water, but he'd be buck naked and just like want to come out. And I've just always thought about that as president, emerging from the other side. I don't know if that's true. I'd like to think it is, because it just kind of goes to the personality that he was, where it was like, it was pure shock value, but more kind of also doing what he wanted to do, which was going for a nice cold plunge, right?
Yeah, yes.
Instead of emerging and you can just kind of see this in downtown DC. You're just like suddenly emerging from the water with all of these like ladies out for their afternoon carriage ride or whatever, and here's the president emerging with no clothes on or whatever.
Yes, dude.
And
yes.
Here's a guy who dislodged his retina because for part of him to push himself, but also to exercise, he would get an actual Marine who is, not the same age as him by any means, young guy, and he would, have him box with him. And so he gets hit so hard in the head by this Marine that it actually dislodges his retina. And I'm like, as the sitting president, and you are actually boxing a kid who's 20 plus years younger than you are, and you're not, and he's like under orders to not go easy on him, that he gets hit in the head so hard it dislodges his retina. That's pretty amazing. And here you have a guy who decided that he was going to build the Panama Canal. So to do that, and the ethics around this are questionable, he creates a civil war so that Panama is able to separate from Colombia, and he creates a new country for all intents and purposes so that, we can go down there and build the Panama Canal. Mm-hmm. And so here you've got a guy who was just this absolute force of nature. I'd be interested to see where he comes down in today's world, given the fact that I think a lot of people try to make some comparisons as a force of nature, just given who he was. But I think that he also had a deep belief in America and deep belief in the process and love for who we are as a country. And so I think that while he was this force of nature, at the same time, I think he was far more intelligent and a very deep thinker as to the consequences of some of his actions. I don't think he did things necessarily just for the short-term gain. I think he made some big calculated risks and took some big calculated risks. And there are definitely some times in his life when you can say that there were some, ethical questions. But at the same time, I don't think he did it just for the personal gain. And so, I don't know. I think the true kind of conservative nature of people of the old school Republican Party doesn't necessarily exist anymore. I don't look at somebody like Eisenhower and think that there is a similarity between the Republican Party of Eisenhower and the Republican Party of today. But I'm not 100% sure I see a huge link, and I'm going to get eviscerated for this comment, between a lot of the leaders on the Democratic side of today and the Democratic Party of my grandfather.
Zero.
I don't necessarily see the direct link in all cases. I think there are people on both sides that still stand true to the old values of the parties, but I also think that there are a lot of people that have tried to push both parties as far to the extreme as they can possibly go. And that's a very scary, scary situation.
I think it's fair to say that most people know how vital strength training is for long-term health and fitness, but find it hard knowing where to start. I'm here to say that also included me, Dr. Steve. You want to make sure you're doing exercises correctly, you don't want to get hurt, and you have no idea how to structure a workout program to get the best results. I've been there. In fact, this is where I found myself a few months ago. That's where On Target Fitness comes in. At On Target, every client gets their own custom strength program, tons of individual attention in their unique small group format, and the common sense nutrition and health coaching necessary to make a lasting lifestyle upgrade. As a new member of On Target, I'm not only seeing major changes in my body, but also my overall quality of life. In the past, I've struggled with using proper form. Well, let me tell you, whether it's Coach Joe or Coach Ryan, they've got you covered with technique. Even movement patterns as simple as walking have improved since I've started. When I was working out by myself without a program, I was often lost and lacked the motivation to challenge myself. Not at On Target. The energy and support in the group dynamic is truly game-changing. I have so much fun every time I work out. If you're ready for lasting change, don't hesitate to schedule a complimentary strategy session at www.ontargetfit.com. During this session, you'll learn a lot, make a plan, and only move forward if it's right for your budget, schedule, and goals. I met with Coach Katie, and she was awesome. So please, if you need that giddy up back in your life, get on over to ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today. Yeah, I couldn't agree like more about how we are we're shifting people away from what like a Democrat. Like when I grew up, I grew up, I was raised a Democrat because my dad was in the union. It's how he supported 5 kids. It was just how, how it went. That's the unions were the people who protected, the Democrats were the people who protected unions, throughout history, going back to Samuel Gompers and when these things actually started, unions. So that's just how I was raised. I so FDR, JFK, all these guys just love. This is a today. What I see is not that at all. It's not. It's they were the anti-war party. They were the party who was trying to help the people who were underprivileged, trying to help people who were regular folk. That's not the case anymore. They're keeping regular folk down. They're censoring regular folk. They're making it harder for people to exist. I mean, they the whole thing through COVID and how that was handled and how they censored people and didn't let people and smart people who I respect my whole life because of me being in the health field, just gaslighting them. And so the Democrats have changed. Completely. I think that I do love what you say that like what would happen. So your great uncle, TR, he ran as a Republican, served as vice president to McKinley. Then McKinley died, was assassinated, became the president, won again, and then decided like, no, I'm not gonna continue to be president. I'm gonna.
Well, that's how he got elected as his only elected term was by following in the tradition of George Washington and saying, I'm not going to run for another one because McKinley was assassinated so early in that term that he'd essentially served 2 terms.
Yep.
So he really regretted the fact that he wasn't able to run a second time.
He was just trying to do the right thing by the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more to do with just what was expected of him at the time. The tradition, this is where the 2 terms comes from, is up until after my grandfather. Presidents, there was no requirement for the 2 terms, obviously.
Right.
It was Washington who kind of created that tradition. And so everybody had basically said, yeah, they would always step down after 2 terms. But that was just the tradition.
Right. It wasn't law. It was just tradition.
No, and it wasn't law until after my grandfather. That's when they passed the constitutional amendment to make it law so that you can't run for more than 2 terms. But you can't run more than twice. You could if you were in TR's case where McKinley was assassinated, so he became president. He could have actually run. I think under the current law, he could have run for a second term. Run a second time. You can't be elected more than twice.
You can't be elected more than twice.
Yeah.
So that's why Trump can run.
Trump can run again, but he can never run after this. I mean, he can run. If he's elected, he can never run again.
Right.
So
okay. It's not how many terms you can serve. It's how many times you can technically be elected. That's the law.
Yeah. So you can essentially be elected president twice only.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be consecutive. It's not like you do 2 terms, step down, come back again like Putin keeps doing.
Right.
Right. You do your time, you step aside, then you come back again. You get somebody else to step in for a short period of time, then you come back again. No, it doesn't work that way. You can only be elected twice.
Yeah, and I think that's probably good. But I mean, 2 terms is enough. 8 years is enough to get things done. I think that's a good.
Yeah, 2 terms I think is fine. I also think that if you look at the history of the country, you look at the sort of zeitgeist of the country in any one period of time, it usually kind of fits. We get the president that fits the time and the need of the country. If you look back in history and whether that creates sort of the personality of the country at that time, or whether we get what we kind of need at the time. Whether they're a great president or not, I'm not talking about their policies. I'm talking more about sort of where we are as a country. And so, looking back, you think about where we were in the 20s, and we had a very laissez-faire government, very laissez-faire driven president. We had a country that was booming, that was really going that way. And then, and I'm just cherry picking. You look at my grandfather through the 30s and 40s, you had a president that very much fit the needs of what we had from a personality standpoint of the country. And then you go to, somebody like Truman and even into Eisenhower, and just think about what we did with under Eisenhower in the 50s and where the country was. And just, we'd just come out of the Great Depression, the war. We were much more insular focused, but we were becoming that true world power. And, we built the interstate highway system, which for all intents and purposes created the next, 60-year boom, 70-year boom that the country went through. And we invested in ourselves. And so we had a president and a political sort of system that was willing to take the time to really think through that and actually invest in what we needed as a country to grow. And we don't have that right now. Nobody wants to actually invest in the country per se for the better of everybody. It's more about, political issues that can divide people rather than unite.
So that person can then get in and make money and advance whatever they want to advance for their agenda?
I guess. It's never quite black and white like that, but, I think whether the personality of the country fits the president that's running or the president we have versus the president kind of slots into who we are as a people at that time. But I think we get who we need for the most part. It's not always that we actually are going through a great period in time, so we get the right person. But we definitely get kind of where the country as a whole is going.
It's based on it's based on the country. It's based more on the country than it is the leader. Or they just match up. They just happen to match up.
Now you're going to go back to TR, and you've got a guy who it didn't really matter. He was going to push through kind of what he wanted. Most great leaders come out of times of real strife. And here you have a guy who is considered one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, and he did not have a depression. He did not have a war. He did not have any real strife at home. And so he kind of created all of these opportunities for himself to be that leader.
Right. Okay. So the opportunity at home was right for that type of person too. Yeah. Okay. I do think, because he eventually too, he saw, he didn't like the way the country was going, right? He started the Bull Moose Party. That was a pretty cool thing. I think that would be amazing if somebody had the gall to do that now. Somebody who could get the, that much of the vote, and change and say, hey, let's break this thing up. Maybe this two-party system isn't what we want. Because he did get the second amount. He ended up Taft lost because he lost the Republican primary to Taft. He split the vote, right? He split the vote, and so the
same
Democrats
could have been said for Ross Perot splitting the vote for the Republicans and essentially making it possible for Clinton to get into office
in '92. Yeah.
So there's the Republican Party, for all intents and purposes, started as a third-party platform. They're now the only two. They're now one of the only two that are left. But it took historically, we're not a country that likes that third party because you are the way that the country sort of splits is you're going to split the vote for one of the two major parties, which means that you don't usually appeal to both sides. With the two parties going extreme to the right and to the left, I don't know. Maybe there's an argument to be said that if you found a way to create a party that really straddled the middle and could appeal to the true swing voter, the middle of the road voter, maybe you could have a viable third party. But the question is, are they going to be a truly viable third party, or are they going to be more like the Liberal Democrats in the UK, where they just kind of exist and don't really pull enough votes to ever really get a proper seat at the table?
Right. And I think to your point is the way to do that would be you would need somebody. This is something that if I had the backing, it's something that I would potentially do if I didn't have to worry about like my family and income and taking care of them. And that third party can exist, right? Like, but what we need somebody to actually go and get on the stump again right now for 16 years from now or for 12 years from now, where they start to create this and they're saying, this is the new platform that I'm creating and I'm going to dedicate everything to this. And this is the centrist, the centrist platform that I have. Start local, get people in local government, start somewhere. And people have tried this in the country, even in here in New Hampshire. There's a big libertarian movement. That's why Vermin Supreme, the guy that we just mentioned, is here. He's plays with the libertarians. And they moved a ton of the I forget what it was called, but the Free New Hampshire. There's a big documentary about it where they had a lot of libertarians move here and got into local government and got what they wanted, created some stuff in certain places and was able to progress what they wanted, whether that was good or bad. It was
Free State Project.
The Free State Project. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mike. It was cool. I actually I was doing a podcast with Marianne Williamson, and I got to meet the guy who did that, who was the cameraman for the Free State Project. So that was a pretty cool connection just to talk to him about that. But I do think that it's it would be cool if we could break through and if we could eventually have a new platform or just the machine is what I think is what we want. Is we don't want the machine to be able to overrule like everything that we think and feel. And so you have Democrats and Republicans that you have to feel this way. You have to be in this box, or you can't. You're not able to even have a conversation with people about it. I think that's a tough place to be, and that's not what people want.
We make mistakes all the time. Are we allowed to learn from them? Depends on who you are. And we need to be a little bit more open and tolerant to the fact that not everything is going to be 100% right from day one. We have to be open to the fact that things will change, mistakes will happen, and we have to just be able to stand up and say, right, this was a mistake, we're doing it differently now. This is what we've learned. This is why it needs to be done differently going forward. Are we able to do that? Not really.
I wish you could be the leader, man, because you want to know what? Like Fauci, I agree. Human beings make mistakes. There's been a lot of shit. I have a lot of stuff out there. I've done a lot of episodes in this podcast. I've said a lot of stuff that even now, I've been only doing this for 2 years, and I already have changed my opinions on some of the stuff that I have put out there in the ether.
Yeah.
And so that's something that but guess what? I'm responsible for it. I will say, hey, if someone brought that up to me, yeah, I thought that once, and then someone gave me more information, or I learned this way, and now I think this way, and this is why.
Yeah.
And
I love people that disagree with me. I love people that disagree with me. Why? And I love people that challenge what I say and what I think, mainly because I know I'm not 100% right on everything. I may come across that I have that belief, but I absolutely love it when somebody disagrees with me. Because if you can challenge the premise of my assumptions or my beliefs, and you can show me that I'm wrong, I'm more than happy to say, right, I'm wrong, and I'll move in that direction. Mm-hmm. That said, I may also come back again if somebody gives our belief, our thoughts on a lot of things, what we think are absolutely right today and we know are going to change in the future. You cannot be that dogmatic and that stuck in your ways. Otherwise, you are never going to be able to change and you're never going to be able to grow. The only way we grow in life and become better at everything we do, from our interactions as humans with each other, with our friends, with our family, to our work, to everything, is through change. And change has to be a part of life. It has to be a part of everything.
Yep. The only way is through.
I was listening to NPR on the way up here, and they're down in Pennsylvania right now doing their show. And they were interviewing a Mennonite family that are farmers, and they were talking about traditional values, conservative values, all of this stuff. But throughout everything that they said, I as a card-carrying member of the Democratic Party and as a proud liberal, found more to align myself with how they were talking, but primarily because they firmly believed in change. They firmly believe that everything throughout our lives has to change. It has to, otherwise you can't grow and you can't improve. As an example, they are, 6th or 7th generation farmers on both sides of the parent, the husband and wife, the matriarch and patriarch of the family, who are getting close to retirement. The farm that they run right now started life as a dairy farm. They got rid of all the cows, and they're now goat farmers. They're doing the same stuff. They're their milk, their cheese, they're all this stuff, right? But they changed from cows to goats. Now, that kind of a change doesn't seem like too crazy, but if you're fundamentally changing how you're farming like that, to be open to making a change of that nature, and they as a family kept referring back to that as an example of how they had to change to be able to continue as a functioning farm. And they looked around to their peers and they saw farms closing left and right. And one of the things that they kept saying is that a lot of the reasons that farms are closing so often is because people are completely unwilling to change how they do things. And so for them, as what would have probably in the past been a very conservative Christian family, they were coming across as more kind of middle of the road, sort of open, liberal. Were there probably some social issues that they would have a big difference of opinion on than I have? 100%. But in listening to them, I firmly believe that as in our core values, we were all probably pretty close to each other. And I found that really interesting, and it was eye-opening for me to listen to the way that they were talking, because I think they really brought it back to this kernel, this real fact that change has to happen. We have to always continue to grow and change. And I'm trying to remember. I think it was. I'm trying to remember. Was it? It was one of the famous Chicago economists, University of Chicago economists. My brain's not functioning right now. Who used to talk about creative destruction. And and we were talking about this earlier. Tragedy creates opportunity, and destruction creates opportunity, and you have to change. Destruction's a pretty big, powerful word, but yeah, things have to change. They can't be exactly the same all the time. And in some cases, that change has to be fundamental, and it has to be almost like destruction.
I love every second of that, because it's like a big theme on the show is like the only way is through. You have to go through it. You have to change. You have to adapt. And I've never actually heard anybody give me that type of perspective on it, that it's like, it's a necessary. I've always talked about it as like a thing of growth, and that it's great and that it's something that we should strive for. But what you're saying is that it's necessary to our being. It's necessary.
Yeah, of course it's necessary to our being.
We've been doing it forever.
History, we have changed from the creation of fire to the creation of language, and just everything in our lives changes, including us. Physical. As we get older, we change. There isn't anything in our lives that doesn't change. And so you think about this from even, the most fundamental part of who we are, our family relationships and our personal relationships, your marriage. If I think about people that have been married for 50 or 60 or 70 years, and you think about how much they have changed individually, but also as a couple. And I just think it's that change. It's what you go through and how you face life together that creates you as a couple. It's somebody said to me, it's not the completion of a task that is so rewarding. It is the actual achievement of something. It is the work. It's losing 20 pounds and getting to the point where you're like, yeah, I lost 20 pounds. It's not that's not, when you think about all of these things you've done in life, it's not the actual achievement itself. It's what you did to get to that achievement that is usually what you remember the most. The moment you're like, yeah, I just lost 20 pounds, is a fleeting moment in your memory. Or it's the finishing the marathon. You remember finishing the marathon, coming across, but what makes that moment of crossing the line? Now, I've never run a marathon, but I'm kind of slightly talking out of my ass here. But crossing that line isn't the piece. It's everything that went into it. It's the months of training.
Yes.
It's the 26.2 miles to get to that point, right? The actual act of crossing the line is only important because of everything that came before it.
Literally. I love this.
And so I think about that and I'm like, yeah, if you think about the journey you went on and the change you went through to be able to do what you've just done and accomplish whatever you set out to accomplish, you're not the same person when you get to that point. You're just not.
Not even
And
close.
it doesn't matter how small the changes are, they exist. And so if we think about everybody requiring us to think a certain way, speak a certain way, believe a certain way, and none of that can change, it's always got to be the same. It's just, yeah, it's fundamentally against human nature. And so change has to happen.
Yeah, it's we have to go through it constantly, and it needs to keep happening. And I think that, the way that you put it, it's all about the journey. It's not, you don't draw back on, so for instance, I used to be 280 pounds, I used to be a big boy, and hot yoga taught me how to be comfortable in my body and and because of that, I lost a ton of weight. I'm now 180 pounds. And so I don't, like I said, I didn't even know I was actually losing the weight when it was happening. And when I stepped on the scale and I saw the weight, because my clothes didn't fit anymore, and I stepped on it, I said, holy shit, I've lost a lot of weight. It had nothing to do with that. And this is now 5 or 6 years ago, where all I remember is the journey, and I remember the journey, and that's actually what I draw back on is that change, is the change that I went through, and the way that made me feel in my body. It made me feel better in my body. It made me feel healthier, but it wasn't because I lost the weight. It was because, that helped obviously, but it was the journey of going through it. It was being with myself. It was working out, finding out that I love to work out, finding out that I love yoga, finding out all this new stuff about myself, and then changing and adapting. And then, which is really cool about it, is now I have a tool to change and adapt in the future. If I need to continue, which we all need to do, it's a perpetual process. So when I'm feeling stuck, I know what to do. Go to a yoga class, and things are going to move through, meditate, move through.
Oh yeah.
Do you do any practices like that? Do you have any meditation or?
Yeah, I've been doing TM, transcendental meditation, for a little more than 10 years now, somewhere around about 10 years. My mom actually started back in the 70s, and I learned how to do it. Must be almost 10 years now. And it's twice a day, 20 minutes, and I love it. It is it's what gets me through the day. It's what keeps me focused and kind of keeps me centered and helps me deal with a lot of the stress and everything. And so the times when I'm not able to do it, I notice it in a fundamental way in just how my brain works and my body works and how I feel, how I sleep, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a key part of my daily routine.
With your practice, because I know with TM it can be different. It's not like mantra based. You're not.
It's mantra based, but it's not. You use the mantra. You're not trying to empty your mind. The key difference is trying to embrace what's going on in your mind and what's going on around you, and not. So I used to meditate on the train going into the city every morning with lots of noise around me. You embrace the fact that you may not even feel like you're actually meditating at some points because there's so much going on in your mind. You kind of embrace those thoughts as much as everything else
as they come up.
Yep.
So you're not trying to put them away. You're just saying these exist.
It's got to be simple. I tried a lot of different techniques of meditation. From sitting there trying to clear your mind all the time and working really hard. I found they didn't really work because I ended up focusing too much on on the action of meditation as opposed to just letting it happen. And when I found TM and the way that it just embraces everything going on, the thoughts, et cetera, what's naturally occurring in your mind and in your body, that worked so much better for me. It became a much more natural, simple act of meditating. And so, you have a mantra, you use the mantra, and you come back to the mantra, but it's not. You're not trying to like a lot of other meditations. You're not forcing yourself, or at least what I felt was kind of forcing myself.
Right, yeah. It's a lot of
into a
meditations
state, yeah.
might be like listening to something, listening to a script, listening to some type of mantra, constantly repeating the same mantra. But with TM, you kind of you have a mantra, but whatever comes up, we're gonna get into it. And
Yeah, thoughts naturally occur, and so you need to embrace that. And so, but yeah, and I've done different types of meditation from, having like a script or listening to something, and I like them. I use them at different times, depending on where I am, what I'm doing. I use some of the kind of more, the meditations where I can listen to a meditation and have somebody kind of walk me through that. I do that as well, but I do my TM is kind of the core part of my practice. Yeah,
it's so funny. Everyone I have on this show, I always I'm not sure, whether they're, if they're into the same stuff that I am, and but one thing that I always my guests are always connected on is some type of form of meditation. We're all doing some type of form of meditation, which is really cool because I have a very wide array of guests who come on the show. Liberals, conservatives, businessmen, yogis, all these people who, you might not, a lot of people, the yogis come on, we're all doing meditation, giddy up. But then you have somebody who comes on who's big, big in business and, entrepreneurship their whole life, very serious, very conservative. And they're telling me that, oh yeah, I've been meditating for, my entire life.
Oh yeah. I think the people a lot of people have some form of meditation, whether it's prayer or meditation or whatever it is. Or they could be the same. I think most people have some way of kind of managing and centering themselves and managing the stress. So some people go for a long run, a long walk, or they'll sit down and they'll pray, or they'll actively meditate, whatever it is. Everybody has something that they do that helps to kind of bring them back to where they are and being more present. Or at least I hope everybody does, because I think that act of bringing yourself back into the moment and being more present just in yourself is, I think, critical to getting through the day, especially if you've got, you got kids, you got work, you got everything, right? All of these different things pulling you in so many different directions today, from your cell phone to your computer to your whatever. If you can't take a moment and kind of bring yourself back into what's going on right now and just be in your own head or in your own body, I think for me at least, it becomes really difficult to kind of get through the day without without just being exhausted, like physically and mentally absolutely overwhelmed. Yeah.
The sad thing is I don't know the percentage, but I know that not everybody has it, because I know I didn't have it beforehand. I didn't have these tools before. I mean, everyone has something. I do agree.
Everybody has something, whether it's constructive the problem is or not. Whether it's constructive or whether they're always doing it is the question. I and even in my life, there are moments where I look back and it's like 2 weeks in, and I know that I haven't been able to meditate for an extended period of time, and that's because I will get to a point where just everything kind of just feels disjointed and out of place. And I go through the day and I don't have the same amount of energy and I don't have the same amount of focus, and everything feels, the easiest way to describe it is disorganized. And that is, and if I'm not able to kind of center myself and bring things back to just that one moment, then everything, when I'm able to do that, everything kind of falls into place and sort of lines up properly. And it's almost like, my brain just reboots.
Yeah, it's good for you for understanding that and knowing that. And that's what I think saying is most people, they don't have that connection or realizing that that's like, they fall into it a lot of the times. My dad, like a very angry guy, right? Like the way that he used to do it was a not a constructive way. He used to yell and scream, and that's how he would change. That's how he would express himself. He learned now, like he can, become physical movement, walking, going for a walk, listening to certain types of, sounds can really help him out.
Yep.
And so he's meditating. He's been meditating for the last 3 years since he's been doing this, and just in his own way. And he's finding it in his own way. But I agree, like at first, what you said, because I was like, oh, does everybody have a way to do it? And but sometimes everyone does have a way to have that release or have that change. Sometimes it can just be not.
I think people lose. They have that mechanism. I do think that a lot of people lose their focus and realization that it's really important, and so over time they can they can forget that worked for them, and get stuck in a way of just having to get up and get going and doing stuff and not taking that moment to kind of center yourself at some point during the day or the week or whatever it is. And so I do think that some people eventually lose it.
Yeah, they lose it, but it's always there.
At some point in their life, they had it. Whether it's going for a walk, whether it's, painting, reading, whatever it is that allows you to just kind of refocus your brain and bring yourself into the here and now is everybody at some point had it. And the question is, can do they lose that with all of the jumble of like everyday stresses and just being pulled in every different direction?
They do lose it.
Yeah.
Because I've lost it. It's something that's innate within us that you have from when you're a child, but you can lose it because of the stress and everything on you. But you can regain it. This is going to be a fun question. And do you think that cannabis can be helpful with this, with helping people, find that again?
Can cannabis itself be a catalyst for finding that? I mean, I think it could.
The ability to be present, right? The ability to slow down.
I think I think that really depends on your personality and kind of who you are, and also your willingness to be open to finding that again. I think that, as with anything, cannabis can be a crutch that allows you to not necessarily look for something like that because it may give you that feeling. I think that everything in life, whether it's whatever it is, serves a purpose. And as long as you understand what the purpose of that is, and you don't try and use it to kind of cover up other problems because it makes you feel relaxed, or it gives you that moment where you can kind of come back and relax and manage the stress in your life. As long as you don't try and use it to cover that up, then yeah, I think it can give you the ability to find that again. But I think, as with anything, it can also be the crutch that allows you not to look for that moment and what's going to, and continue that change. And so I think it can be super powerful, but again, I think it depends on the person and what they're looking for. As an example, I was told about 6 more months ago that I'm type 2 diabetic, and the doctor wanted to put me on not Ozempic, but one of the
metformin.
One
of the GLPs.
One of the something like Ozempic.
Yeah, one of the GLPs.
I can't remember which one it was, and I said no. Originally, I said yes.
Wegovy.
That was it. It was Wegovy. Originally, I said yes, absolutely, and it took me a little while. There was, for some reason, there was like a mental block for me. The prescription was in, pharmacy had it in stock, and I couldn't, for some reason, I was always finding reasons not to go over and pick it up. And it took me a little while to kind of spend the time to think about why I was not going to pick it up. When they wrote the prescription, I was like, yeah, let's do this. And part of that was because I looked at it, instead of saying, okay, I need to make certain changes from diet to exercise, et cetera, in my life to manage this, I was looking at the medication and I was saying to myself, okay, so I'm going to do this, and this is going to mean that I'm now going to lose weight, and all my markers for type 2 diabetes are going to get under control because I'm on this medication. And then in 3 to 6 months, then I can think about making the changes I need to make from a diet, exercise, et cetera, because I will have lost weight, I will have done this. and everything will be better. And part of the reason I think that I kind of found this block to go pick it up was because I knew if I went on the medication, I was using the medication for the wrong reasons. I was using the medication as the answer, not as the means to make changes. And so I ended up I was very concerned that if I went on there, I wasn't going to actually make the changes because I kind of didn't have to because it was going to do everything for me. And so I ended up not doing it, did a ton of research myself, and blew the markers away over the last like 6-7 months. So it's like, I went from, super high numbers down to just above normal, and all because of changes to diet and starting to exercise. And, now now it's working on other things, continuing to kind of work on my weight and et cetera, but continuing to make long-term changes so that the benefits and the improvements I've made in my health can actually continue to get better, but also stay and not sort of go backwards. And I think that with anything, like that medication, if my intention was to make the changes I need to, and this was going to help me do that, and hopefully I was going to be able to come off of it, but my fear was I wasn't going to make the changes I need to. And so, yes, I think cannabis can be hugely powerful in helping us to find and to improve our lives. But as with everything out there, if you're using something or, for the wrong reasons, then you're not going to necessarily make the changes you need to. But at the same time, if you're not capable of making the change yourself for whatever reason, it doesn't mean you're not going to be in the future. And so if something's going to help you in the meantime, great. That's fantastic. You need to improve certain things from pain, from stress, from whatever the issue is. If cannabis can help you with that, great. And then hopefully in the future you can figure out some of the root causes as well and manage those. I think it can do, but I also think it's up to the person.
I think that's another wonderful perspective that you're sharing with me, because the people, it's not a panacea, it's not a cure-all.
Yeah.
It's not, none of this stuff is. I'm a big believer in all types of plant medicine, and I think that they can help us, unlock a lot of our, I call it stuckness, when we get stuck in our own way and we just can't think in a different way. And I think that it gives us different perspective, and then we say, oh shoot, if I can just do this differently, then this can happen. But at the same time, it's something that can be abused, and something that can be, is something just like Wegovy and Ozempic.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's literally the same thing. And I applaud you for that. And I think that that's a giddy up. That's a giddy up. That you looked it right in the face and said, you want to know what? I'm going to try to do this on my own. And I'll tell you what, Jack, we met about 8 months ago. And you,
for the first time, met in person, at NECAN back in March,
and
which is essentially right around when I got the diagnosis for type 2 about a month or so later.
And you look like not night and day, but you look a lot better now than I did when I met you. So I can tell that you've started to make changes. Not that you look, you still were a handsome fuck with the thickest hair I've ever fucking seen in my life, dude. Like you were still, a handsome guy, 6'8", beautiful looking, but you look even better now.
Yeah, and honestly, like the changes I made, like I'm still very much overweight. I've lost a little bit of weight, and that's probably the biggest thing I've got to work on going forward. But so first, thank you for what you said. I will be the first one to kind of play that down and be like, I'm not sure I look very much different, but I feel very different. I'll say that much. And just making changes in diet, it kind of drives home how much you can impact your life by just some very simple changes.
The feeling is everything, right? Like that's what I go towards. It's like, it's great that I look better and that people think that I'm skinny or whatever, that's cool. But it's like the way that I feel in my body, the way that I can move around when I wake up in the morning, and I'm just like, holy shit. And like, to be honest, that does happen first before like the weight or anything else changes. That happens. You get this beautiful exercise routine going, or you're eating healthier or whatever, and you start to feel better in your body, and you're
Yeah.
like, I can feel this good.
Yeah, you feel like a different person you feel like you're wearing sort of like makeup or something. You feel like you're wearing sort of somebody else's body for a little while
literally.
until you kind of grow back into who you are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And
100%.
And I love too you just being honest about it, because I think a lot of people in cannabis sometimes they just are promote. Cannabis is the greatest thing ever, and it is a really awesome
Yeah, it
thing.
is.
It's an
It's
amazing
amazing.
tool,
Yeah.
like so amazing. Like, in the fact that it's been hidden from us and taken from us for as long as it has been is a very sad thing. But
Yeah. And I'm encouraged that it's now, it's not 100% legal. It's still not federally legal. And I think that's a mistake, but I think it'll change. We will get there. And I'm the first one for all the things my grandfather did. One of the main negatives was signing the bill that essentially led to the creation of cannabis as being a Schedule 1, rated Schedule 1 in the 70s. But it was basically the
Marijuana Tax Act.
Exactly.
In the 1930s.
Exactly. The bill he signed, I think it was 35 or something like that. I don't think he understood what he was doing, but I love the fact that I now get to play a role in helping open the market up for everybody. So yeah.
I think that's the coolest thing. That is a storied thing in your family, like you said. Your grandfather signed the marijuana tax law into act, and now you have Lucida Club.
Yep.
And you're a part of the community. This is your business, and you're bringing people. You're helping brands with cannabis, and that, it just must be really interesting to have made that jump.
Yeah, I think the interesting part was more making the jump from being your kind of stereotypical finance guy to a tech startup in cannabis. I think that was. I don't know if you had met me 15 years ago, you would have said that that's kind of where I was going. But and I'm not even sure I would have necessarily seen it coming either 15 years ago. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride doing Lucida Club. It's been talking about the journey and how it can change you and what you learn and how you grow. I think doing anything like a startup is more about. It's got to be more about the journey than it is the destination, because the journey is intense, and if you're not in it for the ride, then it's going to be brutal, and it will kill you and chew you up and spit you out.
Yeah, 100%. It will literally. So you weren't in startup beforehand. I know that you were.
A little bit. I talk about having been in a startup before because I went from finance into renewable energy, and so I thought I was an entrepreneur coming out of the renewable energy side.
Because it was so new, because it was just such a new space to be, getting into.
Yeah, it was a new space, and it was our business, and I was a partner in the business, and so, but it was very much, I think I would say that my role in that business was a little bit more along the lines of your kind of traditional either real estate or renewable energy development side of things, and so. I think that the two of my partners, especially, who were there, the CEO and the chairman and the president of the company, who I think were more on the entrepreneurial side. But again, doing something like that, you're following a path that kind of already exists, and so you're not really inventing the wheel, and it's a different product that you're selling as well. There is a market out there. There's a customer for you. There's somebody who's going to either buy the power or invest in the project. And so the question is, can you find them? Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, especially with version 1 of Lucida Club, which was really trying to answer a need that I felt very personal about, because it was me. I was the canna curious. I was somebody who had smoked or, in high school and college a little bit, and well, a lot. And then I hadn't really touched weed in a long time. Like, I think maybe I need one hand to count the times in the 20 years, sort of post my mid-20s until that I really consumed. And that was, look, I was moving around a lot, so I didn't know how to get it when it was illegal. After I'd moved from a couple different cities to a couple different cities, eventually you're kind of like, okay, so what do I do? Just drive into a sketchy neighborhood and start asking people? That's like profiling of the first order. But and also I was in an industry that if you got arrested and for something like that, you're going to lose your license.
Yeah.
And so,
like being a regulator, banking, you're saying, like the
yeah,
finance,
in the finance world, you don't want to get, you get arrested for doing something illegal like drugs, you're going to get fired and you're going to lose your license. And
so they still have to worry about it. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
We have a group, just like the chamber around here that that we mess around with, and all the bankers, whenever we talk about, because we're a cannabis business, we're legit. We have cannabis businesses. We talk about it, and they, we go to like tell a story about it. The bankers are always like, not yet.
Oh yeah, well the bankers are going to be like, yeah, not yet at all, because they can't touch your money. I think if they're working and living in a legal state, they can consume, and that's the difference. I really wasn't even able to consume in those days because if I'd been arrested, because it was totally illegal, and so if I'd been arrested for doing something like a Schedule I narcotic, even weed, yeah, you're going to lose your job, and you're going to get a ding on your license, and it's not gonna look good, and so. There was
drink all the alcohol you want.
100%.
No weed.
Drink as much alcohol. Be an alcoholic. Go to rehab for being an alcoholic. But
we'll help you pay for the alcoholic rehab. But
yeah. And so it was. There were a lot of obstacles for me in those days. And so when I was here not here in Massachusetts, because we're not here, but when I was back in Massachusetts, having been down in the Bahamas doing the renewable energy thing, come back up here primarily to be closer to my son. And rec sales went legal in Massachusetts in November of 18. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing that and being like, okay, so it's legal now. I wanted to try and find something that could help me sleep better, that was more natural to the things that I was taking to either help me deal with stress or sleep or whatever. But for me, I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I did. So I thought when I went to that dispensary for the first time back in summer of 2019, I remember going there and I remember walking in and I went in super confident that I knew what I was doing. And I remember walking in there, and it took just walking in the room into the dispensary for me to realize that, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore. Okay, I didn't understand half of the words that were on the menu. There were all of these different strains up there. I didn't understand why one was different to another. There was like different levels of THC. I didn't really understand what the difference between indica and sativa was, hybrid. Last time I'd made a purchase, it was like $20, $40 or $80 an eighth kind of thing. You didn't know what the strain was. Nobody was telling you whether it was indica or sativa. Nobody gave a shit. And it was, So it was like, guy had a big ass plastic like bucket that at some point probably been used for paint, and it was just filled with buds, and had 3 or 4 of these things in different price tag, and you'd sell him how much money you had, and he'd reach for the one that would give you the most amount for get you the most amount of weed for whatever you had cash on hand. And that was it. I didn't really care about anything else, and so. I like to say that buying cannabis today is not like buying weed off the stoner crew in college.
Way different. We're talking like 16, 17% at most. Now they're testing at 40%. It's a completely different product. It's
100%. And that was, you just hit the nail on the head for what was one of my biggest fears going in there at the time, which was I did not want to go home, take like one rip off of something and end up in the corner without being able to feel my face. That was not an experience I wanted. I thought I understood the experience I was really looking for. The problem was I didn't know how to get there. And I knew the one hurdle that really concerned me the most, and that was potency. And that was just making sure that I actually enjoyed my experience and I didn't end up so absolutely off my tree that I didn't want to come back again.
Yeah, right.
And so I walked in and asking questions. I was like, yeah, I just want someone to help me go to sleep and maybe unwind at the end of the day. And so lady behind the counter, the bud tender's like, great, anything from the left-hand side of the menu, basically anything that's an indica. And I'm sitting there looking at this menu and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at new words like keef and shatter and all this stuff, and I have no idea what any of that stuff was. And so I saw a tincture, and I was like, okay, great. I'm going to buy that because I'm pretty sure I know how to dose a tincture. And there were only two options, and it was small and large, so it was either $45 or $90. And I was like, great, I'll take the $45 bottle, and here's your money, and I'm out of here. And ironically, it wasn't for like another year and a bit that I realized there was like no THC in that tincture. Which just, I had no idea at the time. And I didn't know what I was looking at. And so I was sitting in the car afterwards and I was talking to my business partner at the time, and I'm just saying to her, like, if this was the experience it was for me, which was probably the most intimidating retail experience I've ever had. If this was my experience as a 6'8", 300-pound white guy walking in the door, what's this going to be like for essentially every other mainstream consumer that's walking in here? I thought I knew what I was doing when I walked in the door there, and it did not take long at all, like a second and a half for me to realize that I had no idea.
Wow.
And that feeling of not knowing was, I think, what made it that much more intimidating. And also just honestly feeling like I didn't belong. Because I didn't know what I was doing, I also felt like I didn't belong there. And so, and that made it even more intimidating, sitting there asking questions, because you don't want to look stupid.
Right.
And if you don't, and then you don't know where to start with the questions. And so I thought about that, and I think that as the marketplace grows, the mainstream consumer as they come into the marketplace, they're looking for something. They need some questions answered, and they need it to be a little bit easier to access. And so that was the first version of Lucida Club, was a direct-to-consumer marketplace. And we did all the work for you. And it was supposed to be a way for you to, as a consumer, come in and find different products and different brands and different, and find something that was going to really work for you. Because again, a lot of this with cannabis is very much, it's a personal experience. And so I can have one thing, I can smoke something and you can smoke it, and we can have very different experiences. A lot of that is tolerance, but also it's the way that the cannabinoids interact with your system. And so I wanted to find a way to help people access and buy something that wasn't going to really ruin the experience for them and kind of drive them away from the market, make the marketplace much more accessible.
Yep.
And so we boiled it down to three real questions, which were, do you want to smoke something or not? What experience do you want? Do you want something to help you sleep, celebrate, be creative, whatever? And then how much do you want to spend? And so we had three price points, $100, $150, and $200. And we would curate the package for the retailer that was nearest to you. And all you had to do was answer those three questions. And we would basically put the order together and find the best three,
great.
whatever products, depending on the price point, that would work for you based on. And the more you come back, the more we learn about what you like and what you didn't like about different products, the better we can personalize it for you. And so, yeah, that was version one. In doing that, I worked really closely with a number of retailers and brands in particular, trying to understand their product lineup and kind of how to curate that. And that was really what opened my eyes to what I think of as probably the biggest problem from business standpoint for cannabis brands, and that is that legally you're not allowed to sell direct to consumer. And so how, if you're a brand in 2024 and you're trying a startup brand or even a well-established brand, how do you build a really sticky consumer base and build an actual brand that people want to and come back to time and time again? And you talk to most retailers and they'll tell you the same thing. People shop three things. They shop tack, they shop price, and they shop availability. And that really rings true. Even what I would consider the more mainstream consumer that is kind of focused more on the tack being essentially being the amount of THC that you've got.
Okay,
right?
Yep.
So, and that's what people are looking for: the highest content THC, the lowest price, and they don't really care about the brand as much. So what you see is people will walk in, even if they know what they like. They'll walk in, they'll say, "I like this, and what do you have that's similar?" They're not going to walk in and say, "Do you have X brand and X strain or X product?" And if you don't, I'm going to walk down the street to your competitor, and because they probably will have it. Right. And so consumers are programmed to that's how they shop. They walk in, they go, "This is what I like. What do you have that's similar?" So what I wanted to do was really empower the brands to activate consumers themselves and build that loyal following in the same way a brand in the non-regulated space would be able to do. So if you were trying to launch a new granola bar, this is, how would you do that? How would you find those early adopters? How would you differentiate yourself? Find the consumers that are coming to you for what you give them, and then build it out from there. And that's really, really difficult when you cannot sell direct to consumer, because in the cannabis space, and it's the same for the alcohol space, a product brand is a consumer brand, but they're actually a B2B business. Their customers are the retailers.
Right.
They have to sell to the retailers. They have to get on the shelves for the retailers, but they're a consumer brand at the same time. And, you mentioned earlier, we met in person for the first time about 8 months or so ago. And it was at that NECAN where I had probably one of the most honest conversations with a flower brand I've ever had, where I went in to tell them what we do. And the head of marketing just looked at me and said, "We are not a consumer brand. We are not a B2C brand. I don't care about going direct to consumer. We are a B2B business only." And she's dead right. And now the downside is that works really well. And this is a big flower brand that you would have heard of today. It's owned by a multi-state operator. They're very successful. And if they keep that mindset, I think they're going to go the way of the dodo in the next 3 to 5 years. Why? Because today's market is a B2B marketplace, and it's very difficult for you as a brand to activate new consumers and own that consumer relationship in the same way a product brand would in the regular retail space. But the brands that learn how to do that and use tools and technology like ours are going to be the ones that win out in the next 3-5+ years. And that is because as competition has gone insane, and as an example, in Massachusetts, I think we have like 30 or 32 different brands of THC infused beverages on sale, like in the state. How do you differentiate yourself if the market is that packed full of competitors? And essentially you're all the same product. You're all infused seltzer, or you're this, and everybody has got the same flavors. It's really just packaging, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are some differences, But if you walk in and you're saying I am, and let's face it, I've never met anybody that grows flower that does not tell you they grow fire, right?
Yeah.
So you're out in the market. You're like, okay, so
Facts.
everything is so similar. So how do you actually differentiate yourself? Well, in a world where a brand doesn't actually know who their real ideal customer is, because they don't have true insight into the customers that are buying their products, because they need to get that from the retailer.
The retail shops won't give it, yeah.
And the very few retailer shops will actually pass that down. How do you differentiate yourself? In the regular world, you'd walk in and say, this is who we target. Your client base, Mr. Retailer, Mrs. Retailer, is this, and we fit perfectly into this section of your market, and this is how we're going to drive customers for you, and this is who we attract, and this is why you want to carry us. But for most cannabis brands, you say, who's your target consumer, and they're just going to say somebody that likes weed.
It's really true. It's like and I think that's like really the model. Like, there's not many retail shops, at least what I'm dealing with my product in Massachusetts, that like even understand their own brand as a retail shop. So they are just trying to sell weed and make money, and that's it. And they're not. A lot of them aren't trying to create a brand or try. I try to get them to see this, and some of them absolutely do. Some of the partners that I have in Massachusetts are incredible because they see that and they see the value. Like, oh, you're a granola crunchy guy. You're giving people a not nerd rope. You know, where not gummies. You have a beautiful product that's healthy. That's going to just be healthy for people and allow them to get their cannabis as well. We see that. That's what we're trying to do too. Send it. That's obviously where I do the best, where I have the best relationships with stores, but a lot of these retailers, they don't even want to come close to even talking about that relationship. They don't want to have to, they don't want to give me anything. They want to just say like, yeah, sure, we'll order. And my situation's even more difficult because I have a licensed product, with a company who I have to go through to get any information from, and I'm allowed to do whatever I want and talk to these people independently, but I don't control the button that says order gets sent. So like sometimes you don't know what the inventory level is. Sometimes you don't know what's going on at the stores. You try to call, you try to keep up on it. They're not always responsive because they're just trying to sell weed. So like there's a ton of challenges for the brands right now. And I think that like that's what's going to drive the industry is when people, associate themselves, people like Bud Light. People like, Smutty Nose. People like their beers. They like their alcohol. They like what, their specific, even, they like Apple versus Android. They like their brands. And so without that happening, and two, I find there's a lot of retail stores that understand this, but then instead of being like, oh, we have to create a brand, a true brand, a story behind the brand, they just say, let's get a designer, let's slap 5 different brands on 5 different labels of our in-house stuff, let's repackage it into these brands and put it on the shelf. And that's also that's wild to me because that's not effective. And so the brand-driven story I think is so cool, and I think that you guys are your business provides that for brands to be able to. I love doing business with you. I think that it's great, and I think that anybody who would be would benefit from it. Would any of these brands, especially the bigger brands who are already have a little bit of a foothold in these in these regions.
I mean, my target right now are brands that are kind of they're in market and they're really trying to drive their expansion because for us to be able to work. So, for the listeners, just the way we work is we actually surface the inventory of a particular brand that are a retailer might have. So you come in and I'll use a couple of the brands we work with, Coast and Levia. So, you want Levia, you want their Celebrate Seltzer. So you want to know who has it in stock that's near you. You instead of going and hopping from one retailer website to another to see who's got what in stock, you should be able to go to the brand website, which you can now, and you go to their Celebrate or the Seltzer page, you pick the flavor you want, and then you click the Order Now button, and you'll see exactly which retailers within a 3 to 10 mile radius of you have that item in stock. And you can build the shopping cart right there, and you can push it and it gets pushed to the retailer as a pre-order. So you still have to go to the retailer and pick it up, but this is the best way and the nearest way for you to be able to actually have a true e-commerce experience for the cannabis brand. and or you can go. So let's say you've gone out to somewhere where you live in Boston. You've gone out to Western Mass. You're out at listening to the Boston Pops or something in the summertime, and you're going to go sit in the shed, and you want to take some Levy or some gummies or something with you. But now you're staying in an Airbnb and you don't actually know any of the retailers around you or what they stock. So you go to the brand's website, the product you want, you go onto their store locator page and you look at all the retailers in the area, and now you can shop that retailer's inventory of the brand you're looking for. And you can do it all while being on the website for the brand and never leaving it. I equate it to, it's fall now, we're heading into winter. I might want a new fleece or a new jacket. So let's say I want a new fleece, but I don't really care about the brand and I don't really care about the color. I just want to see what's out there. What am I going to do? I'm going to probably go to Amazon, or I'm going to, go to one of my local retailers, a store that I know that's down the road for me, or I'm going to go to like Macy's or Nordstrom's or something like that, right? And that's fine, because I'm going to go in and just see what they have, because I don't really care about the product. Now, if I absolutely want a Patagonia vest or a Patagonia fleece, I'm going to go to Patagonia.com and I'm going to shop that brand. And the brand is the arbiter of truth. The brand, and I even now have the option, I can, as I'm about to check out from Patagonia, I'll have the option to see the local retailers and who has the product I'm looking for, the item I'm looking for in stock, and buy it directly from one of my local retailers while never leaving Patagonia's website. And that was what opened my eyes to the ability for us to be able to do this in the cannabis space. Because when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's genius. That's the only way that we can actually shop, is by knowing which retailer has the product in stock right now and pushing it to them as a pre-order. And so looking at it that way and saying, right, now we can give the consumer a lot more choice. And so my mission has always been to make sure that the consumer has the ability to find what they're looking for and make it easier for the consumer to actually come into the cannabis market and find what they're looking for and essentially have a really good experience. At the same time, if I get to empower the brand and give them the ability to build a brand and to build their products and to better serve their consumers, then that's gravy, and that's really knocking it out of the ballpark. And so that was my mission with this, was give the brand the data so that they can now understand who's buying their product, who's looking for their product, what products are they really looking for, and to be able to now iterate on that because of what they learn about the consumers and what they want to better serve the consumer. But at the same time, if I can make it easier for the consumer to find what they're looking for. So I used to have a saying, which was, it should not be this difficult to buy what you want. And that has really driven almost every decision I've made in how we've built Lucida. It should not be this difficult as a consumer to find the products I want and to actually purchase what I'm looking for. I shouldn't walk into my local retailer and say, I like this, what do you have? I should, if I want a specific product, go buy that specific product. If I don't care whether I'm wearing a blue fleece or black fleece and who made it, then I should just go to the retailer. And that's the thing. We have very different relationships with our retail brands as we do with our product brands. And so my relationship with, Patagonia or somebody or a product brand like that is fundamentally different than the relationship that I have with Nordstrom's or Macy's or Amazon or my local, or REI or whoever it is. Mm-hmm. Because they're a retailer. They have a brand themselves, and I should look at them as a retailer. But I look at the product brand when I'm looking. That's where my kind of truth on the product itself comes from.
Yeah, I think the retailers who are going to be successful and are going to survive are the ones who are going to realize this and get on board with this. But some would fight against this, right? Like some would want to push back because they like the ability to be able to not manipulate the customer, but that they're the gatekeeper of truth, and like, you know, when the customer comes in, they just have this weed. Maybe their ordering, if their ordering system is locked in and they know what their customer base is and they know who they're serving, then it's easy. But a lot of these places, they still haven't figured that out, and they have, you know, they're ordering a lot. You know, they may order, you know, 100,000 pre-rolls of this certain strain, and they don't realize that that's not what their consumer base wants. So then their management is going to push on them, hey, we got to sell these pre-rolls. You know, like, so if a customer comes in and we don't, you know, let's get them on these pre-rolls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so there's a ton of that still going on. So like to incentivize the right retail shops, the ones that have their customer base, you know, honed in and aren't buying an extraneous product and are actually, you know, moving through product consistently. Like, I can tell what those stores are immediately, because versus the people who order 1 case of honey, you know, once every 3 months versus people who order 3 cases of honey every month. Mm-hmm. You know, it's pretty clear to me, like, who is going to be doing well and who's going to be successful. Do you think the retail side of it could make it harder for Lucida to? I mean, the right retail is going to be the right retail, so I don't think it matters. But do you get challenged? Are you challenged by some of these retail stores? Do they present challenges for you working with them?
Yeah, they have, but from my standpoint, you know, it's really, once they realize the benefit that we bring to the retailer, and quite frankly, competition in most markets, especially the ones that are kind of either matured or getting to a mature state, where you have essentially, you know, either reached or kind of past saturation for the number of retailers that you can have in a market, competition is insane. And so anytime that a retailer realizes that what we do is benefit them, because now their brand clients, the brands that they carry, are a source of foot traffic and revenue and transactions, that opens the door for them. So once they understand what we can do for them, it's a kind of a no-brainer for them. There are definitely some retailers that look at it and are like, for them, it's still a zero-sum game. And I think those, and honestly, there's still a lot of the marketplace in the cannabis space on the retailer side still believe that this is a zero-sum game. And that anytime a consumer goes to one of their competitors down the street, then that's a transaction that they lost and that they should have had. And I look at it and think that actually the more, once people realize that it's not a zero-sum game, it's really about growing the pie, not taking as much of the existing pie, but growing it. And I look at, you know, the alcohol space and just think that there's a liquor store and a packy on almost every other corner. And people wouldn't be able to make the kind of money that they can make on the retail side from alcohol if it wasn't about growing that pie as large as possible. It's not just about, you know, competing and making sure that you grab every possible transaction in your area. There is a certain, you know, who are you going to serve? And so I look at sort of towns where you've got 3 to 5, you know, it's a small town, and they may have 2, 3, or even 5 liquor stores within a 10-minute drive. And if that's the case, you're going to look at most of those liquor stores and realize that they all serve a slightly different purpose, right? You know that you're going to go to one because they have a great selection of microbrews and beers. The other one may have the higher end wines that you're looking for, or maybe they're going to have a better selection of kind of bourbons and spirits and whiskeys and stuff like that you like. And maybe there's the one that it's like, yeah, I just go there because I can buy my Corona, and, you know, you get your staples and that's it. And they've just got everything you want. And that's where I think we've got to get to. As a retailer, you've also got to understand who your market segment is and who you're serving in the area. Mm-hmm. And sure, do I think that a lot of the retailers, especially in a state like Massachusetts, are going to go the way of the dodo? Yeah, absolutely. We've got too many in certain areas, and they're going to close down. But again, that's just a natural role of the market. And it shouldn't be for regulators to not issue those licenses. I think the regulators shouldn't be trying to cap it. I think they should just be issuing the licenses and let the market play and let there be a natural kind of equilibrium point where
they never should have capped it at 3. Like
I
3
don't know
stores?
about 3 licenses. Now you're getting into a whole nother conversation. It's not about 3 licenses per brand. I'm talking about
Cap in general.
in general. I mean, there's talk about why a regulator's still offering it, and most municipalities have a cap on the number of licenses that they'll allow from a host a community agreement, right? That they won't allow more than a certain number. I think you should just, if people are looking for it and they're willing to make the investment into being an entrepreneur and starting a business, I think that you should let them give it a go, because every time a new retailer opens up, they're either going to go bankrupt because the market was already saturated and everybody's needs were already being met, or they're going to open it up, do something slightly different, and potentially better serve the community. And one of the existing ones may have to go, or maybe nobody's going to go out of business because there's a real need for that store.
They grew the pie.
They grew the pie. Exactly. And so the only way you know where that limit is the market will tell you when the people that aren't doing it right go out of business. And so I think that, we should let that happen and naturally let it get to a point where we understand and every sort of municipality and local area is going to have a different saturation point. And so competition at the moment, especially in a state like Massachusetts, is insane if you're a retailer, and it's insane if you're a brand. And it is that has really meant that people are thinking differently, and they're trying to find ways to reach the consumer in a more direct way, which has really opened the door for us, because in the past it was, first mover advantage when Massachusetts first went rec retail. The brands that were able to open up really fast were able to get that first mover advantage because they were the only option.
Yeah, big time. That's what's been up here for sure. What people deal with is the first mover advantage. The people who got started early, they had a huge head start.
Yep.
But that is starting to level off now.
Yeah, and that's great, because if you had that, I'm sorry, I didn't even step on you. If you have that first mover advantage, the downside is you don't have the competition trying to make you produce a better product. You have the only or one of the few products that's in the market, and so therefore the quality of the product is not as important as just the fact that you're there and consumers don't have another choice. And so as more competition comes into the market, it only makes things, in my mind, better for the consumer, because now, you can't have 10 brands or 20 brands or 30 brands all producing exactly the same product, because there just isn't room for that. So you have to find a way to iterate and improve and find those little, niche reasons for appealing to consumers. Otherwise, every time you show up to a retailer and you say, I want you to carry my product, the retailer's going to go, but I've already got 8. I got 8 flower brands. Why do I need another? And you all produce fire. I've got, 5 different brands of gummies, and you're all producing the same flavors. It's all the same thing, just a couple different price points. Why do I want to take a brand off that I've already got traction with my consumers and replace it with you? Why do I need another beverage? Why do I need another tincture? Why do I need something new? And the only way as a brand that you can differentiate yourself is to walk in and know exactly what you're going to do for that retailer and say, this is what differentiates us as a product. This is what differentiates us and what I will bring to you from a consumer standpoint, because this is who I appeal to, and these are the consumers that are going to walk in your door looking for my product. And so that's the only way that you're actually able to really, really, truly differentiate and grow. The only way that you can do that is by being able to communicate directly and sell something. And so, unfortunately, for us to really, really work, you need to have a footprint in a market. You have to have, the only way for people to be able to buy a cannabis product is from a retailer. And so if you have 0 retailer footprint, where are you going to send them to buy the product? I can't direct the consumers to a storefront that doesn't exist. And so I do need you to have a little bit of footprint, but once you have that, it makes a big difference because now you can really start to grow what you're doing around those retailers and use that to get yourself into more retailers. Because when you walk into a retailer and say, this is what I'm doing to help you and to drive foot traffic through your front door and to actually drive revenue into your business, that's a big differentiator. And so even when every brand is doing this, the difference is going to be at that point, the difference is going to be about the execution, right? And so now it's not just an expectation. At some point, it's going to be not just an expectation from the retailers that all brands will be using either us or, there'll be other competitors that pop up that do this. It will be an expectation. It will be okay, so how do you execute on these tools that you have? Right now, it's a benefit just having the tools because you can walk in and say, right, I can do this, and I'm going to actively be helping you. All the brands that I talk to, and I'd be interested to hear, everybody I talk to says that when they talk to a new retailer, the retailer's first question is, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to help me actually drive?
Sell your product.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
That's
what they want to know. And like right now, the method is like, I'm gonna show up in person. I'm gonna bless you guys with some gear. I'm gonna try to make as good impression as I can with your staff and people who are there, and that's good and it works. But it's like it's fleeting sometimes because obviously these people, they only stay in the positions for as long as they're gonna stay in them. They're getting bombarded with all types of free stuff all the time because that's the only way to really do it. There is no way to really like advertise, and people are getting really creative. It's why I've created this, for an opportunity for cannabis companies to advertise. But they don't have that ability. And the retailers, they need help. They don't want to take on a brand for somebody who's not willing to help them.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so funny. A lot of these brands just think like, oh, I have this great brand. All the retailers are it's like, no. You need to work on every single store and every single, every single subset of that.
You're not the only one. Now, you're unique in the fact that, you have a unique product.
Right.
So that's intriguing. And that I'm assuming
definitely
kind of helps you.
100%. It's what's landed me in maybe half the stores to begin with is that they didn't have a honey. And they had a honey, but they didn't have the honey guy. They had nobody doing it like I was doing it. They had somebody who just tried to put some distillate into a honey and it was a fail, but any other honey brand that they've had, maybe they've tried something in-house or something, but when I show up and I tell them, no, this is my business. I've created this based on, getting people healthy edibles with it being carried as as honey being the carrier agent. And I tell them about the technology that I've created, that it does it in the absence of heat. They are just like, oh, that's really cool. We don't have that. That's a cool thing that could definitely fit in here. And then I need to show, they still ask, how can you help me sell it? Then I need to show them how I do that. Like I said, right now it's through pop-ups, it's through, it's through engaging the brands, it's through this show, it's through, eventually working with Lucida Club and making that move. And so figuring out where to put my resources for digital marketing. And there's a lot of, there's some companies out there, but nothing with what you guys are doing. It's completely novel. No one's doing it. Some companies.
Nobody's doing it in cannabis. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but it's been around in the regular retail space as online to offline for about a decade or so, and it's the fastest growing side of portion of e-commerce.
Why don't they have to do it with alcohol though? That's my question.
Well, so
is it because the brands are big enough and established?
No, not at all. Actually, alcohol is a huge opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's the exact same problem. Now, alcohol is a little bit different because you can have a special license. So my sister actually has a Mezcal brand that she launched a couple years ago, and they're doing great. And now I can go to her website and I can actually buy a bottle or whatever directly from her website. Now, I look at that when I'm making the purchase and think that somebody at Mezcal Campante is going to be packaging that up and shipping it to me. Actually, that is being run by another business that has a special license that allows them to ship across the country.
A repackager.
And so basically the order is done on her website, but it goes from them and they would ship it to me. What you can't do is I can't go onto her website and say, hey, I know you're available in Massachusetts. Where are you available right now? Like which packy can I go to pick this up? And where can I go and buy it? Because I don't want to wait 2 or 3 days, or I don't want to actually buy it there. I want to go down the street right now and pick it up. And so, yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there, 100%. And so, I mean, I've been very focused on the cannabis space, but at some point that will be something that we're going to look at very seriously.
It only makes sense because, like you said, those brands would benefit from it, especially a lot of the small, like around here, man. There's so many small, microbrews that get started that that are successful that then get into liquor stores that they have their brewery and then they get into liquor stores and they're doing wholesale.
Me, I'm a huge fan of Maine Beer Company. My favorite, I think a lot of people, is Lunch. And I know all the packies around me, all the liquor stores around me that sell Maine Beer Company. And the most frustrating thing is that they don't always have what I want in stock when I want it. And so that is 100%. It's the exact same problem. I should just be able to go on to Maine Beer Company's website, figure out which retailer has it in stock, and either buy it directly from the retailer, go pick it up, get it delivered to my house, or just put the order in and go pick it up. And what we see in the cannabis space, and what's going to be interesting when we are able to make that move, is in the cannabis space for the retailers, there's a huge upside for having that order coming in from the brand's website. So if you think about it as a retailer, when I put in a pre-order on a retailer's website, I'm essentially doing this for convenience. So I'm putting in essentially a full order. Maybe they're going to upsell me on some papers or something if that's what I want. But I'm putting in what I'm looking for. I'm not walking in that door expecting to be upsold. So for most retailers, it's hard to upsell a online order to something new, right? Mm-hmm. And to add something and to get any meaningful, maybe you'll add some swag or maybe you'll add some papers or something on there. But it's really tough if somebody puts in an order, it's $100 to turn that into a $150 or $200 transaction when they walk in the door. However, if the order, if one of our brands, if you go onto their website, and that's the thing is you're not coming to Lucida Club. You don't ever need to come to my website.
Right.
Right. The consumer should never come to my website. The whole point is the consumer goes to the brand's website.
Right.
That this is all done on the brand's website.
Yeah, so they won't even know what Lucida Club is.
Yeah, they'll see when the widget pops up, you see it's like powered by Lucida Club. That's the only reason.
Yep.
All right. But otherwise, everything should be about the brand. And so that's the real differentiator for us to Weed Maps or Leafly or anything like that, or Dutchy or anybody is I'm not trying to build a third party marketplace. I want all the power to lie with the brands. Mm-hmm. And so you go to, a Coast or a Levia, or you go to a Yellow Labs or Perpetual or whoever that we work with, and you actually look at them and go, great, now I want this product. That's your anchor product. That's the key product that you wanted when you walked in the door for that retailer. So the ability for the retailer to then upsell you, and because it's probably not a full order, is huge. And so that's where the real benefit for the retailer, they want that transaction coming from the website of the brand.
Because otherwise they were going to go to their competitor down the street and spend $200 there. But now they want the specific product from the specific brand. And sure, they do want some other stuff to go along with that.
Yeah, and we see this, somebody will put in an order for 12 cans of Levia and they'll walk in and they'll be like, great, now I want a vape, or I want some gummies, or, maybe I want something else. And that's where the ability for the retailer to go, right, they just put in an order for this product. That means when people order this and it's their key product, most likely they're going to look for these other options. And so now you can steer, now you know how to present, what options to present to them that will hopefully most likely lead to an upsell. But in some cases, and we have this a lot, people will come in and they'll be like, I want my 5 bags of gummies that are going to help me go to sleep. And they're going to max out their order for the day. And that's going to keep them for the next, week or 2 or 3. And they tend to come back and that's all they want. And there's always going to be the consumer that wants that. But other ones are going, I want 2 bags of Coast Tangerine gummies. And when I get there, I will look for what beverages they have, or I'll look for vape, or I'll look for something else. But this is the most important piece of the puzzle.
Can they do it on the website too?
So
like I go to Levia's website, I sign up for Levia. It tells me that I'm going to be getting my, Levia is going to be, at this dispensary. I'm going to go to this dispensary. Can I then add on the extra stuff in the transaction then, or do I need to do it in store?
You need to do it in store because at the moment, there are some complications if you think about it from the retailer standpoint and from the other brands.
You're mixing
right?
brands, yeah. 100%.
You know, other brands don't necessarily want, or Levia may not want, or Coast, or whoever it is may not want other brands being surfaced on there. So at some point, you know, that is sort of the next iteration is to how do we solve for that and make it so that once you've found which retailer has the Levy or Coast products you want, now you can actually transition and build a shopping cart that's around your complete order. Mm-hmm. But for right now, you're not able to do that yet. You've got to do that in store.
I think it's better that it's not like that because then the retailer gets the ability to upsell on what they want to upsell. They have good relationships with these companies. They want to help these brands. They do want to. So it's a two-pronged approach. It's
better for the retailer on that front. But again, you know, the two things that drive my business are around making choice for the consumer. And so in my mind, as long as we are focused on what the consumer wants and is looking for and giving them the most options, that is how we're going to kind of grow the pie the most in the marketplace. And so, sure, there are going to definitely be a few retailers that don't want us to give the option to them because it's easier for the retailer when the consumer walks in the door for them to upsell it. But at the same time, I look at it and say, well, you know, sometimes the consumer may be like, yeah, this is what I want. I'll figure it out when I get there. Other times they're like, no, I don't want to figure it out when I get there because I don't have the time, or I just don't want to, or I know. And so at that point, they're like, I don't want somebody else's opinion. I don't want their help. I know what I want. I just need to know which retailer has the product in stock. And so I think, again, the more options you give people, the better.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I think that the more that you give people the option, the better that it's going to end up being. The better the product, the end case will be. I'm so excited for what this is going to look like in 3 years and in 5 years. And I appreciate you so much for coming on today and telling me all about what you're doing over at Lucida Club and sharing with me your past and some of your the family memories and stories. And are any of your brothers and sisters, are any of them using the cannabis? I know they're a little bit older. And
honestly, I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I would assume yes, but it has not been a conversation necessarily that's come up.
Maybe the next family reunion.
Maybe the next time we do something, I'm going to ask that. But yeah, I'm assuming some of them are. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, same with this is the same exact thing with my family, and it's so exciting when you get those little giddy ups, right? When they say like, "Oh yeah, I've been using cannabis to help me sleep. I've been using it for this." It's like you were so against it, or you were so not about it. So I appreciate all of your honesty today. I do hope that I can have you back on the show another
100%,
time.
man. This has been a lot of fun. So thank you very much for having me up here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, please, when you get a chance, go to Lucida Club, follow them. Check out what Jack is doing. He's really building brands in the cannabis space.
LucidaClub.com and LucidaMarketplace.com.
LucidaClub.com and if people want to reach out to you, they can do it through there.
Yeah, they can do it there. That's the easiest way. So just be, I think, hello@lucidaclub.com is the easiest way to reach out to us. My direct is just jack@lucidaclub.com.
Okay.
And so go check out the brands that we work with, please. And hopefully it'll allow you to actually buy the products from them that you're looking for.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, guys, please check out Lucida Club. Please check out what Jack has going on. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And until next time, giddy up.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
You know it, brother. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, man.